portrait of a young woman seated was painted by Thomas Couture between 1850 and 1855. This painting depicts an unknown young woman seated in a chair wearing a white dress with very little jewelry. Couture was born December 21st, 1815, and died March 30th, 1879. Couture was a very popular artist of his time, best known for his portraits, the most famous of which is called Romans in the Decadence of the Empire. His use of tonal contrasts is thought to have inspired the painting style of many other artists of the time. Couture was a master of academic classicism, which combines the classicism and romantic styles into one, and taught several young artists such as Edouard Manet, Henri Fontaine-Latour, and John Lafarge, many of whom would later turn out to be well known and respected. Couture himself studied under Baron Antoine Jean Gros, a master of the neoclassicism style. The portrait was a part of the Gurlitt art collection, which was recovered in 2012 by the German government officials when they raided the apartment of Cornelius Gurlitt after he came under suspicion of tax fraud. It later turned out that these suspicions were unfounded. This painting was owned by Georges Mandel and was taken from him by the Nazis in 1940. He was a French journalist and politician coming into the French government to work in the Ministry of the Interior under Georges Clemenceau. Mandel became postal minister in 1934, lobbying heavily for France to ally themselves with the Soviet Union in an effort to prevent Adolf Hitler and, by extension, the German Nationalist Socialist Party, the Nazis, from gaining too much power, as well as to try to control the Nazis and protect France itself should the Nazis come into power. Obviously, things did not turn out the way that Mandel wanted them to. Mandel, originally named Louis-Georges Rothschild, fled France on June 21, 1940, to Morocco, where he was arrested and transported back to France. In November of 1942, he was delivered to the Germans and was held in Oranienburg and Buchenwald, two concentration camps in Germany, before being sent back to German-controlled Paris on July 4, 1944. 3 days later, on July 7th, on orders of Joseph Darnand, head of the police of the French Vichy government, he was shot to death in the very country that he had once tried to protect from the Nazi menace. After the painting was stolen from Mandel, it made its way to a Parisian art dealer by the name of Raphael Girard. It is unknown whether Hildebrand Gurlitt, a known art dealer and collector employed by the Third Reich, bought Portrait of a Young Woman Seated from Girard, or if Gurlitt already owned the painting and was simply storing it with Girard. After a period of time, Gurlitt gained possession of the painting and it stayed in his possession until his death on November 9, 1956, where it was then passed on to his wife, Helene Hank, who held it in her own possession until her own death, at which point it passed on to their son Cornelius Gurlitt. It is suspected that Hildebrand Gurlitt played a significant part in the gathering and burning of thousands of works of so-called degenerate art, that being art that did not conform to Adolf Hitler's ideas of what true art was. Degenerate art included Expressionism, which was the most popular modern art style of the time. Almost anything painted by Jewish artists, as well as just about anything else that wasn't the traditional Germanic realistic style. When Portrait of a Young Woman Seated was first found among the other artifacts of the Gurlitt art trove, it was unidentified. It wasn't until a small hole was discovered in the canvas on the woman's chest that experts realized that this painting was a work that had been stolen by the Nazis. This hole matched a description of the painting written by Rose Valland, the woman who cataloged a large portion of works of art that were stolen by the Nazis, as well as a description given by Mandel's lover when she reported the painting stolen after the end of the war. In 2012, the painting, along with the rest of the Gurlitt art collection, was seized by the German government in the raid on Gurlitt's apartment. Along with Portrait of a Young Woman Seated, more than 1,000 works of art, some of which were stolen from their original owners by the Nazis, were discovered in the apartments as well as in Gurlitt's estate in Salzburg, Austria. The paintings were seized by the Bavarian government and held in secrecy for a year until the press caught wind of it and published a story about the massive collection that had been discovered, estimated to be worth $1 billion. It was discovered that the collection was made up of many pieces that Hildebrand Gurlitt had obtained while employed by the Third Reich, and after that information came to light, Cornelius Gurlitt said that any of the art that was proven stolen would be returned to its rightful owners. Portrait of a young woman seated was later returned to its rightful heir, Maria de las Mercedes Estrada, on January 8, 2019. The rest of the paintings were given to the Kunstmuseum Bern after Cornelius Gurlitt's death, as per his will. Portrait of a young woman seated was the fifth work of art from the Gurlitt art trove to be restituted to its rightful owners. Portrait of a young woman seated by Thomas Couture was recently returned to the heirs of its rightful owner. As such, this should serve as an example of what should be done with any other stolen works of art.